particularly media people. They want to use this binary thing. This is what I saw. It's not climate change. It is the climate of Los Angeles.
What if one day the winds aligned just right and a fire started in the perfect spot, burning through Los Angeles all the way to the ocean? Joe Rogan once warned of this terrifying possibility, and as wildfires grow more extreme in California, his words are starting to feel less like a prediction and more like a chilling reality. In this video, we dive into Rogan's haunting prophecy, his own close calls with the flames, and the alarming science behind why LA might be in more danger than ever before. Joe Rogan's chilling prediction. Joe Rogan's ominous words about the potential for Los Angeles to burn in a catastrophic wildfire have evolved from casual podcast speculation to a terrifyingly real possibility. It all began in 2024. During an episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, Rogan recalled a conversation he had with a firefighter many years prior. The firefighter had made a startling prediction that resonated deeply with Rogan. One day, it's going to be the right wind, and fire is going to start in the right place, and it's going to burn through LA all the way to the ocean. In recounting this conversation, Rogan's tone was heavy with foreboding. He painted a vivid picture of a scenario in which the fire spread so quickly and so extensively that even the most skilled firefighting efforts would be helpless in the face of it. The firefighter's warning was clear. Once the right conditions were in place, the dry vegetation, the fierce Santa Ana winds, and the ever-increasing urban sprawl, there would be nothing that could be done to stop it. Rogan had been speaking about this ominous warning for years, but it wasn't until later that the full gravity of the prediction began to sink in. At the time, wildfires in California were not uncommon, but they were usually contained to rural areas or the more mountainous parts of the state. However, with each passing year, the intensity of the fires increased. They weren't just occurring in remote regions anymore. They were threatening urban areas, racing toward heavily populated cities like Los Angeles. In 2018, Rogan had his own first-hand encounter with this reality. Living in Bell Canyon, Ventura County, Rogan and his family were forced to evacuate as the Woolsey Fire, a rapidly spreading blaze, came dangerously close to their home. As the fire consumed thousands of acres, Rogan was struck by the speed with which the fire spread, and he began to fully grasp the terrifying potential for a fire to move through a densely populated area like Los Angeles. The flames weren't just threatening wilderness areas anymore. They were encroaching on the very communities where people lived, worked, and raised their families. Rogan's warning, spoken with the knowledge gained from that personal experience and bolstered by his understanding of the science behind wildfires, began to take on new significance. The terrifying possibility of a firestorm engulfing Los Angeles from the mountains to the ocean became an increasingly plausible scenario. It was no longer a matter of if such a disaster would happen, but when. In 2019, while discussing climate change with journalist David Wallace Wells, Rogan pointed out that some scientists had predicted California's wildfires could become 64 times more intense by the end of the century. In his mind, these warnings were not just about the changing climate. They were about the changing reality of living in California. As the population grew, more homes were built near fire-prone areas, and the risk of a massive, uncontrollable fire like the one described by the firefighter seemed more likely. Joe Rogan's chilling wildfire prediction is becoming a reality. But what recent disaster has brought his eerie forecast to life? Continue watching to discover how the devastating fires in California align with his warning, and why his prophecy might be more than just a prediction. The 2025 LA wildfires. This January of 2025 saw Los Angeles caught in the grips of one of the most devastating wildfire seasons the city had ever experienced. What started as isolated sparks in the mountain regions surrounding the city quickly spiraled out of control, evolving into a series of catastrophic blazes that ravaged not only the wildlands, but urban centers as well. The sheer scale and intensity of the fires seemed to confirm what Joe Rogan had been warning about for years. This wasn't a distant, hypothetical scenario, but a terrifying reality coming to life. The 2025 fire season began with two major wildfires. the Palisades Fire and the Eaton Fire. Both fires started in the hills of Los Angeles, but soon grew into raging infernos that overwhelmed the firefighting efforts. Rogan, who had repeatedly warned about the dangers of Southern California's unique geography, climate, and wind conditions, had accurately predicted the conditions that would fuel these fires. The intense heat, dry conditions, and the powerful Santa Ana winds set the stage for one of the most destructive fire seasons in modern history. The Palisades Fire, which began in the western part of Los Angeles, was one of the first signs that this fire season would be catastrophic. What began as a small brush fire rapidly escalated as the Santa Ana winds picked up, turning it into an uncontrollable inferno. Within hours, the fire surged through the canyons and hillsides of the Santa Monica Mountains, advancing toward the affluent coastal communities of Malibu. The flames, pushed by winds that Rogan had long spoken about, grew out of control. The dry brush, parched by months of drought, acted as a perfect fuel source, enabling the fire to spread faster than anyone anticipated. As the fire tore through Malibu, it became clear that no area was safe. The fire moved relentlessly down the hills, threatening iconic communities like Santa Monica, Venice, and Pacific Palisades. Celebrities and longtime residents who thought they were insulated from such dangers found themselves in the path of destruction. Homes, some valued at millions of dollars, were consumed by the flames in mere hours. It wasn't just about losing property. It was about the complete devastation of lives and communities that had been built up over decades. Rogan's warnings of a fire that could spread from the hills all the way to the ocean now seemed like a prophecy being fulfilled in real time. The fast-moving blaze left behind a trail of destruction, with roads clogged with evacuees and air thick with smoke and ash. The fire was unstoppable, and evacuation orders spread across the city in every direction. At nearly the same time, the Eaton Fire was making its way through the eastern parts of Los Angeles County, threatening the suburban communities that lie on the outskirts of the city. The Eaton Fire started in the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains and quickly spread to the densely populated neighborhoods below. With the winds continuing to fuel its spread, the fire moved towards the northeast, consuming everything in its path. Much like the Palisades Fire, it was an unstoppable force that overwhelmed both firefighters and residents alike. The fire spread across multiple cities, including Altadena and Pasadena, forcing tens of thousands of people to evacuate their homes. For these suburban areas, the fire was a stark reminder that no one, no matter how far from the city center, was immune to the threat of wildfires. It was a sobering realization that the scope of the 2025 fire season had gone beyond the wildlands and into the heart of the metropolitan areas of Los Angeles. The impact on Los Angeles was staggering. Over 100,000 residents were forced to evacuate their homes in both the western and eastern parts of the city, while more than 40,000 acres of land were scorched. Entire communities, some of which had been established for generations, were destroyed by the flames. For many, including the affluent coastal areas of Malibu, Santa Monica, and Venice, the fire was a shocking reminder that even the most luxurious homes and well-established neighborhoods were not immune to nature's fury. The fast-moving nature of the fire meant that many had only minutes to evacuate, leaving behind belongings, memories, and entire livelihoods. In the immediate aftermath, Los Angeles was left in a state of uncertainty. The sheer scale of the devastation was beyond comprehension. The firestorm had moved with such speed that it left firefighters and emergency responders scrambling to keep up. Roads that once provided access to safe zones were now choked with traffic as residents fled, desperate to escape the encroaching flames. As the fire continued its path toward the ocean, the destruction in its wake was indiscriminate. Entire blocks were incinerated, including homes, shops, schools, and even some of the city's cultural landmarks. In Malibu alone, entire neighborhoods were turned to ash, and the oceanfront real estate that once promised safety from wildfires was now engulfed in smoke and flames. One of the most striking aspects of the 2025 California wildfires was the number of high-profile celebrities whose homes were either destroyed or severely threatened by the flames. Malibu, long regarded as a glamorous haven for Hollywood's elite, was hit particularly hard. With its picturesque coastal views, sprawling estates, and celebrity residents, Malibu became ground zero for the firestorm that devastated the region. Among the thousands of displaced residents were some of the most recognizable names in entertainment stars, like Paris Hilton, Mandy Moore, and the Kardashian family, all of whom found themselves forced to flee their homes as the wildfire spread with terrifying speed. Paris Hilton, a longtime Malibu resident known for her lavish lifestyle and multiple business ventures, faced a harrowing evacuation as the 2025 fires began to tear through the area. Hilton's sprawling estate, which sat nestled in the hills above Malibu, was directly in the path of the inferno. As the flames approached her home, Hilton was forced to evacuate, along with her family and pets. Fortunately, she escaped unharmed, but her luxury home was one of many high-end properties in Malibu that were at risk or completely destroyed. Hilton, who had used her platform to advocate for a variety of causes over the years, took to social media during the crisis to express her shock and to raise awareness about the destructive power of wildfires. She, like many others in Malibu, was forced to reckon with the harsh reality that no amount of wealth or privilege could shield them from nature's fury. The firestorm was an equalizer, touching the lives of the rich and the poor alike. For actress and singer Mandy Moore, 2025 was a year of not only professional milestones, but personal loss. Moore, known for her role in This Is Us and her successful music career, found herself once again in the midst of a wildfire emergency. The Woolsey fire in 2018 had already forced her to evacuate, but this year's fires hit even closer to home. Mandy and her family, living in Altadena, were forced to flee once again as the flames raced toward their property. Thankfully, Moore and her family were able to evacuate without harm, but her home, much like others, was not immune to the fire's destruction. Moore shared her experience with her fans, speaking candidly about the trauma of being displaced and losing her home to the flames. Her social media posts highlighted not just the personal toll of the disaster, but the larger issue of fire management and the need for a sustainable, long-term approach to preventing such catastrophic fires in the future. The emotional toll of having to evacuate for the second time in a matter of years was profound, and Moore was vocal about the broader implications of California's growing fire threat. Perhaps no family embodies the intersection of fame and fortune in California more than the Kardashian-Jenner clan. This 2025, Kim Kardashian West, Kylie Jenner, Kendall Jenner, and other members of the family found themselves caught in the fires that consumed Malibu and the surrounding areas. For the Kardashians, who have built an empire around their homes, businesses, and public personas, the fire was a stark reminder that no one is immune from nature's unpredictability. Kim Kardashian West, who had faced the terror of wildfires before in 2018, when she had to evacuate her Hidden Hills home, once again found herself in the path of the flames. This time, the fires threatened both her own property and that of her family members. In the middle of the night, Kardashian West and her family rushed to safety, joining thousands of other residents in fleeing the blaze. Fortunately, her home and those of her family members were spared, but the devastation in the area was unimaginable. Kylie Jenner, who had built her own multi-million-dollar empire in Calabasas, was forced to evacuate her home as well. The fires that ravaged the area were so intense that many homes were completely obliterated. Jenner took to social media to document her experience, reflecting on the trauma of losing property and witnessing the devastation firsthand. The Kardashian-Jenner family, despite their immense wealth and influence, found themselves in the same vulnerable position as countless other families living in fire-prone areas. Kendall Jenner, who owns a property in the Malibu area, was also forced to evacuate as the fire spread relentlessly toward the coast. Though her home managed to survive the flames, like her sisters, Kendall was forced to confront the reality of the growing fire risks in California. The fire season was no longer just a concern for the state's rural communities. It had become a clear and present danger to those living in some of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the world. While the homes of Paris Hilton, Mandy Moore, and the Kardashians grabbed media attention, the true devastation of the 2025 fires extended far beyond celebrity circles. Thousands of ordinary families lost their homes, their livelihoods, and their communities. More than 10 people were confirmed dead by early January, and the true death toll was expected to rise as authorities continued to search the ruins. The fires in California, especially in the celebrity-packed areas of Malibu and Calabasas, serve as a powerful reminder of how vulnerable all residents are to the growing threat of wildfires. While the media attention focused on the high-profile names whose homes were destroyed, the real tragedy lay in the countless families who had to leave behind everything they had worked for. without the resources or backup plans that many of these celebrities had. Ultimately, the 2025 firestorm wasn't just a disaster for the famous and the rich. It was a catastrophe for anyone in its path, leaving a wake of destruction and heartbreak across Southern California. As the fires continued to burn across Los Angeles, it was clear that Rogan's warnings were not exaggerations. The fire moved with frightening speed and force, just as he had described on his podcast. What was once a hypothetical scenario in the mind of a concerned podcaster was now a devastating reality. The Palisades fire and the Eaton fire proved to be the kind of conflagration that Rogan had warned about. Wildfires fueled by the perfect combination of wind, dry brush, and steep terrain. For Los Angeles, the 2025 wildfires were not just a disaster, they were the fulfillment of a long-standing prediction. Joe Rogan's words, spoken years earlier in the calm of his podcast studio, echoed loudly in the chaos of the firestorm. The destruction was indiscriminate. No one was immune. Even celebrities with multi-million-dollar estates were powerless in the face of nature's fury. The events of the 2025 wildfire season served as a stark reminder of the fragility of the world we live in. California's increasingly volatile climate, coupled with urban sprawl, had created a perfect storm for such destruction. The sheer scale of the damage was a call to action for not just Los Angeles, but for the entire state, to reckon with the devastating effects of climate change and fire management. As the fires finally began to subside, the city was left to rebuild, not only its structures, but its spirit. The devastation of 2025 had underscored one inescapable truth. The warnings had been ignored for too long, and in the wake of this catastrophe, many wondered if California would ever truly be prepared for the next fire season. With A-list celebrities caught in the chaos of the 2025 LA wildfires, let's take a step back and explore how Joe Rogan's past experiences with wildfires led him to predict this catastrophic event. Stay tuned to uncover the chilling connection. Rogan's personal experiences with wildfires. Joe Rogan's warnings about the dangers of wildfires were not based on abstract fears or hypothetical scenarios. They were born from a deeply personal encounter. In 2018, while living in Bell Canyon, Ventura County, a suburban area near Malibu, Rogan came face to face with the terrifying reality of a wildfire that nearly destroyed everything he held dear. That year, the infamous Woolsey fire came too close for comfort, forcing Rogan, his family, and thousands of others to evacuate as flames consumed the land around them. The Woolsey fire ignited in the hills near Malibu in early November 2018. Fueled by dry conditions, high winds, and the ever-present risks of California's wildfire season, it spread rapidly across 97,000 acres. Within days, it had engulfed large swaths of land, burning through forests, ranches, and residential areas like Malibu. The fire moved with such speed that even seasoned firefighters were taken by surprise. Whole communities were forced to flee, their homes and livelihoods at risk. For Rogan, the Woolsey fire was a deeply personal and harrowing experience. Living just a short distance from the fire's origin, he found himself caught in the chaos of evacuation. It was like trying to outrun a monster, Rogan later recounted on his podcast. The air was thick with smoke, the streets clogged with people trying to escape, and the sense of panic was palpable. For someone who had long preached self-reliance, the helplessness of that moment was a sobering reality. His experience wasn't just a scary inconvenience, it was an eye-opening brush with disaster. As the flames swept across the hills, Rogan and his family had to leave their home, uncertain if they would ever return. The evacuation routes were packed with other residents, all desperate to escape the rapidly advancing fire. Roads were blocked, traffic was at a standstill, and the smoke made it nearly impossible to breathe. Rogan recalled the overwhelming sense of dread that hung over the situation. It wasn't just the sight of the flames on the horizon, it was the realization that something as abstract as a wildfire could completely upend your life in mere hours. It happened so fast. 1 minute you're living your life, and the next, you're running for your life, Rogan reflected. This experience forced Rogan to confront the harsh reality of living in a fire-prone region like California. For years, he had discussed wildfires on his podcast, warning his audience about the dangers and potential for devastation. But after experiencing it firsthand, his perspective shifted dramatically. What he had once spoken about in the abstract now held deeply personal significance. The Woolsey fire wasn't just another headline, it was his life, his family, and his community at risk. The fire, which ultimately destroyed nearly 1,500 homes, was one of the most destructive in California's history. The devastation it left behind had a lasting impact on everyone in its path, including Rogan. The community he had known for years was reduced to smoldering ruins. For Rogan, the fire was a sobering reminder of the fragility of life in fire-prone areas. Despite the best efforts of emergency responders, firefighters, and local officials, there was little anyone could do once the fire took hold. In the aftermath, Rogan spent a significant amount of time reflecting on the experience and what it meant for those living in Southern California's fire zones. On his podcast, he opened up about the emotional toll of the evacuation and the uncertainty of whether his home would survive. He emphasized the speed at which the fire spread, noting how residents in high-risk areas like Bell Canyon often had little time to prepare for evacuation. "You can't prepare for something like this," he admitted. "You think you can, but when it happens, it's already too late." The fire gave him first-hand insight into the risks of living in the wildland-urban interface, areas where communities and wildfires frequently intersect. The Woolsey fire was more than just a disaster for Rogan, it was a turning point. It reinforced his belief in the need for heightened awareness of the threat posed by wildfires and amplified the message he had long preached on his podcast. His warnings weren't driven by fear, but by personal experience, one that had shown him how quickly the unimaginable could become reality. What made Rogan's experience even more poignant was the realization that his close call wasn't unique. The Woolsey fire was one of many wildfires to affect the region, and it became clear that catastrophic fires were no longer rare anomalies, but a looming inevitability. Rogan's personal encounter made him even more vocal about the urgency of the issue. In the years that followed, he continued to warn listeners about the growing threat of wildfires, urging them to take precautions and be prepared for the worst. He also became more outspoken about the factors driving California's fire seasons, including climate change, poor land management, and urban sprawl. In many ways, the fire crystallized what Rogan had long believed. California's growing wildfire risk wasn't something to take lightly. His podcast discussions grew more emphatic, and his warnings more urgent. It wasn't just about staying informed, it was about accepting the reality that wildfires were becoming more frequent, intense, and destructive. His first-hand experience with the Woolsey fire validated his concerns and set the stage for a deeper conversation about how the state could mitigate the risk of future wildfires. Ultimately, Rogan's harrowing brush with disaster shaped his perspective and made his warnings more urgent. He wasn't just broadcasting fear, he was speaking from the reality of someone who had faced a firestorm and survived. By sharing his experience, he hoped to arm his listeners with the knowledge and mindset needed to survive in an increasingly volatile world, where wildfires like the Woolsey fire were no longer a distant threat, but a constant danger. California's wildfires are becoming more intense each year, but what's really fueling them? Is it nature or something more alarming? Stick around as we uncover the shocking science behind these raging infernos. The science behind the fires. The threat of wildfires in California is not just an annual occurrence. It is part of a growing crisis that has intensified in recent decades, driven largely by the broader and undeniable reality of climate change. As global temperatures rise, California's already volatile climate has become even more extreme, turning what was once a predictable fire season into an unpredictable, year-round risk. The increasing frequency and intensity of wildfires across the state are a direct result of the changing environment, as scientists and experts alike continue to warn that these events will only get worse in the years to come. California's geography and climate have always made it prone to wildfires. The state's Mediterranean climate, with its hot, dry summers and mild, wet winters, has naturally supported a vast array of vegetation that is susceptible to burning. However, climate change has supercharged these conditions, exacerbating the risks. Global warming has caused a steady increase in average temperatures across the state, leading to hotter summers and warmer winters. As a result, the length of the wildfire season has stretched dramatically, where it once began in late spring or early summer and lasted into the fall. It now extends well into the winter months, creating a year-round wildfire threat. The relationship between temperature rise and wildfire risk is a simple but crucial one. As the state's average temperature increases, the vegetation that fuels wildfires, grasslands, forests, and brush, become drier and more combustible. The hot, dry conditions not only make vegetation more likely to ignite, but also speed up the spread of flames once they start. California's extended droughts, which have become more severe and prolonged in recent years, have only compounded this issue. Less rainfall means that forests and other vegetation have less moisture, making them more susceptible to ignition. Drought, however, is not the only climate change-related factor that's contributing to California's growing fire danger. Extreme heat waves have become more frequent and more intense, especially in Southern California. These heat waves, paired with the regular occurrence of strong winds, like the notorious Santa Ana winds, create the perfect environment for wildfires to take hold. Santa Ana winds, which typically occur in the fall and winter months, can gust up to 70 miles per hour or more, quickly pushing flames across vast swathes of land. The combination of high temperatures, dry air, and intense wind speeds accelerates the spread of fires, making them almost impossible to control once they gain momentum. Adding another layer of risk is the ongoing trend of urban sprawl in California. As more people move into previously undeveloped areas, the line between urban and wilderness areas becomes increasingly blurred. These zones, known as the wildland-urban interface, are especially vulnerable to the ravages of wildfire. The WUI refers to areas where homes, businesses, and infrastructure are built near or within forests, grasslands, or other fire-prone environments. In these regions, the risk of fire spreading into residential communities is alarmingly high. As California's population grows, many people have chosen to build homes in scenic, rural, and suburban areas close to natural landscapes, drawn by the beauty of the state's forests, mountains, and beaches. But these areas, while picturesque, are also highly susceptible to wildfires. Once a fire ignites in these dry, remote areas, it doesn't take long for it to reach nearby homes. The fact that many of these homes are built with flammable materials and are often surrounded by dense vegetation only exacerbates the problem. As the fires move closer to these homes, the danger becomes exponentially greater. The WUI problem is especially pronounced in and around cities like Los Angeles, where neighborhoods, even upscale ones like Malibu and Bel Air, are just a few miles away from heavily forested hillsides. This proximity to wildlands puts urban areas at direct risk during fire season, leaving residents with limited time to evacuate when disaster strikes. Over the years, more and more people have moved to areas like these, even though they are well aware of the wildfire risk. As urban development continues to expand into these vulnerable areas, more homes are exposed to the threat of fire. With so many factors fueling the wildfires, what can actually be done to stop them? The growing wildfire crisis in California requires urgent action on multiple fronts. While there is no simple solution, a combination of better land management, improved firefighting tactics, and addressing the underlying causes of climate change is essential. Many experts believe that investing in wildfire prevention and mitigation strategies, such as controlled burns, fire breaks, and improving infrastructure to resist fires, can reduce the overall risk. Additionally, the state must tackle the broader issue of climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and transitioning to cleaner, more sustainable energy sources. Yet, the reality is that as long as climate change continues to worsen, California will likely see an increase in the frequency and severity of wildfires. For residents living in high-risk areas, it's no longer a matter of if, but when they will have to face the threat of wildfires. The ongoing risk highlights the need for communities to be better prepared for these disasters, both in terms of firefighting resources and evacuation plans. As California braces for even more frequent and intense wildfires, the real question is, how can the city adapt before it's too late? What steps should be taken to protect lives, homes, and the environment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss out on more videos like this one.